I don't think betting small is really a thing here. On a blank, yeah, and he did decide to go for an overbet again. So we have overbet now, a very strong line taken by Luuk. Do you want to know what is inside the Mechanics of Poker program? Go over to the site where you can watch a free 1-hour demo. Hi there fellow poker players, and welcome back to another video here at the Poker Ambition channel, in which today we are going to be railing some high stakes poker. I was taking a look at a couple of games running at GG, kind of preparing myself for when we move up again, and I thought it would be a good idea to kind of take you guys along while I rail the game. As always, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions about hands that were played or any suggestions for the players that played the hands that they played, any suggestions for the players that played the hand, write them down below. Any suggestions for me before I jump into those games, also write them down below. Make sure also to follow the channel, as we will be releasing more content like this very soon. And without further ado, let's take a look at who we have at the tables. I see Mr. Limitless, well known of course. I see Rodriguez from Mexico, Limitless from Macau in this case. We have the Chinese player WJH888. Maybe he used to play on 888 but switched to GG. And I think this is the recreational at the table. We have Paque, Luuk, Gieles, guys that I know. And we have Konstantin, which I don't really know. It looks like he has a Turkish flag if I'm not mistaken. Rodriguez, I'm also not really sure who that is. Like I said, I've just been starting to follow these games a little bit. Most familiar, I would say, with Luuk, Gieles and Limitless. So without further ado, guys, let's see the action that will develop. So in this first hand, Limitless opens the cutoff and Luuk defends in the big blind. Limitless c-bets for their 1/3 sizing, which I think is gonna be the majority of hands that are gonna get into this sizing. You could make an argument for having a couple of big bets on this board as well, but I think just c-betting quite a lot for 1/3 sizing is fine. Luuk is going to respond by calling. Checks the turn. Don't think this is a turn Luuk should ever be leading, and now it's up to Limitless. I think it's a spot that he's probably going to not bet at a very high frequency, and I expect to see quite a lot of overbets. Not too big though, I would say like a slight overbet is probably the preferred sizing. You could also make an argument for adding in a small sizing and using a split. So I see some hands that might benefit from half pot 3/4 and some other hands that benefit from an overbet. However, I would say when we get into earlier positions, I think the 3/4 sizing is or the only sizing that we're going to use, or it's going to be less dominant than the overbet compared to, let's say, if we were on the button. I think on the button a split is definitely a must. Limitless checks back, and now it's up to Luuk in the big blind on a river 6. Again, there's definitely, I think, a difference how you play this spot if you're EP-MP cutoff compared to if you're on the button. On the button, I would like to see Luuk do quite a lot of blocking. When the ranges get tighter, I think we still do quite a lot of blocking, but a little bit less with weaker hands, like a weak 7, for example, is a fine hand to make a small bet now when you're playing versus the button, but it gets a little bit dicey versus earlier positions. I think 8s is a hand that Luuk should definitely now be betting for a small sizing, same with 9s. And there probably are a couple of hands that just want to fire out one big bet now. A hand like King Queen, for example, I think is a good hand to now bet like 3/4 pot. So probably again a mix, I would say. Luuk actually decides to check, and now it's up to Limitless. So Luuk's most likely holding right now is probably something like a weak-ish pair, maybe an ace-jack high that he floated the flop with, like ace-jack with a diamond, for example. Could also elect to bluff that hand. So I think it's more likely that Luuk probably has some sort of showdown value, and I think most likely is that he probably has a pair. Yeah, just a 1-pair type of hand, or a hand that he maybe wanted to check raise with. Let's say a hand like 7-6 would make maybe sense to go for a check raise, or obviously a 5, but I think a 5 is a bit If you have like a naked 5, let's say he has ace-5 of diamonds, I think it's a bit, or ace-5 of clubs, I think it's a bit more likely that those hands would be just betting small. Now it's up to Limitless. So yeah, I said, I think Luuk has quite a lot of made hands here and not a lot of air. If Limitless would now bet, which I think he is very plausible with like the medium portion of his range, he could definitely be checking back queen, jack, queen, 10 type of holdings on the turn. He's gonna have jacks, 10s. Don't think he has a lot of very strong hands, so I wouldn't not like to see a very big sizing. Maybe like a half pot sizing here for Limitless I think would make sense. Targeting a lot of the weaker hands that I just discussed that Luuk has. Limitless checks behind. Luuk indeed shows up with a 7 as we kind of expected. And Limitless gave up the jack 10. But all fun aside, I do understand his give up. Like I said, ace jack or ace 10 maybe with the ace of diamonds I think are very likely check folds for Luuk. So he's kind of blocking his folds. I think maybe he recognized that Luuk in this spot probably then has quite a lot of 1 pairs. Yeah, and then it's just a matter of is he going to fold those. But like I said, I don't think it's a great hand to be bluffing with. Okay. In the next hand, we see Luuk mixing it up with a little limpy under the gun. Kevin completes in the small blind and Mr. Konstantin decides to go for a check. It's checked around to Luuk. Luuk bets. Don't really know how his limping range will look, but it's definitely a very creative play, a creative strategy, which I've seen him use before. I've also used limping strategies in certain situations. I think it definitely is beneficial. But it depends on a lot of factors, right? So in general here, now Luuk, you could say, has sort of an advantage. Both players that have limped in, especially the big blind, just has so much air that if we bet small, there's really not much he can do. Especially also looking ahead, if broadways come in, there's a chance that Luuk might have limped a hand like king queen. And Konstantin, if he's in the big blind and small blind completes, is way more likely to raise a hand like king queen. So let's say, for example, a 10 rolls off a queen or a king. We get into a situation where I think Luuk will have the range advantage that he can put quite a lot of pressure on. And actually the king does roll off, and this is, I think, one of those situations. If you look at Konstantin, for example, he still has a hand like 6 deuce offsuit. That is going to be in quite some trouble facing bets. Luuk actually decides to go for quite a hefty bet even. It's an overbet. And now it's up to Konstantin, who I think is now in quite a tough spot. With a very big part of his range. So that's, I like the play of Luuk. I don't think we should only have an overbet range here. I think this is definitely a spot where we should be splitting. But there's definitely certain hands that might benefit from an overbet. Konstantin goes in the tank, and this is a very tough spot. Obviously, you want to be defending like your hands like queen 9, 9, 10, all these hands that have a pair plus some potential. It kind of also depends how wide you think Luuk is, but I don't think we have to defend here with like a naked 6 or a naked 9 or even a naked jack. So I would probably just defend if I had a hand like 9, 10, queen 9, jack 10, maybe a turned king with king 10 offsuit or something like that. Now it's up to Luuk. So Konstantin did indeed decide to call. The river blanks. So I think Luuk is definitely still in the advantage in general. And I would expect to see another big bet if we do decide to bet. I don't think betting small is really a thing here. On a blank, yeah, and he did decide to go for an overbet again. So we have overbet now, a very strong line taken by Luuk. And Konstantin is in some trouble. And the problem here for Konstantin is that he has a lot of hands that are sort of similar in terms of strength for bluff catching. For example, you can have a hand like 9, 10 and queen 9. They're both very similar. Same with jack 10, jack queen, both very similar. I would almost say king 10 is sort of the same, depending on how Luuk plays ace king or king queen. So I would say, yeah, if I have a king, I would call. And then like the other hands in the middle region, It really depends on your read on your opponent. If you want to play correct, I would say we have to call them with a certain frequency. This is actually probably a spot where a solver would call with a diamond, as in position is most likely to give up with a diamond. So let's say we have 9-10 with the 10 of diamonds. It's more likely that a solver would call that hand, whereas maybe in practice, if people do bluff a flush draw, you don't want to have a diamond in your hand. Konstantin goes in the tank, and he calls with King 9, which is 2 pair, and Luuk does show up with a better hand in pocket jack, so he made a little trappy limp under the gun. Konstantin, I think he just has a call, but as you can see, he was even thinking about it with this hand. Maybe he thought this hand was already a bluff catcher. I think that's a bit too pessimistic. I think if Luuk had a hand like King 9 himself, or a hand like Jack 9, he could definitely play it in a similar fashion. So I would say King 9 is just a call. Maybe he was debating if King 10 is a better call. That would be the case if Luuk is really polarizing. If he thinks Luuk is really polarizing towards King Jack plus and a straight, then King 10 would be a better call than King 9. Limitless opens the button. Kevin gets out of the way. And Konstantin goes in for a 3-bet. Up to Limitless. Who does make the call? Flops King 3 deuce. Gonna be a high c-bet frequency for Konstantin for a 1/3 sizing. That makes sense. Again, there's maybe a couple of hands that you might want to implement a bigger sizing, but I don't think that's really necessary on this board, as it's gonna be just such a small frequency of hands that want to do this. Turn is a queen, and this is a very good turn in general for Konstantin, as Limitless will have quite a lot of pairs that Konstantin won't have, so mainly the 4s, the 5s, the 6s, the 7s, and even the 8s at some frequency. They make up for quite a lot of combinations, and they're all hands that Limitless will have that Konstantin won't have. Also, Konstantin will have improved in the top region, so I think this is a spot where Konstantin can put in quite a lot of pressure. There's not a lot of hands for Konstantin that I think benefit from checking. Jacks, 10s, 9s would be like the first hands that kind of pop up in my head. A hand that is fine to give up is maybe a hand like Ace 8 of spades, Ace 9 of spades if you decide to 3-bet that. But other than that, I would expect to see quite a high barreling frequency from Konstantin. Do you want to better know how to construct your turn barreling ranges in 3-bet pots? I recently made a masterclass how to play 3-bet pots out of position. So go over to the site, click on the masterclass, and also there you can see a free 30-minute demo of what is inside the masterclass. So Konstantin does indeed barrel a half pot, and this is a very tough spot for Limitless to defend. In terms of pairs, I think if we have a hand like 8s or 7s with a diamond, I think those would be pairs that we could probably still defend. Other than that, we have a couple of natural defense, like if we floated Ace Jack or Ace 10 on the flop. Same with a hand like 10 Jack. If we floated that on the flop, I think Ace 5, Ace 4. If we had a hand like Ace 3 suited, I think it's still a call. 4, 5 suited, probably still a call. 5, 6 suited, probably still calling. And other than that, yeah, like I said, we just have a lot of these pairs that we're now going to fold. We're just going to continue with draws, and I would say Queen X plus, and then I think 7s and 8s exactly with a diamond would be maybe pairs that we could consider defending again. River 10. Pot is now 28k, and now it's up to Konstantin. Interesting run out. Think Ace Jack. The benefits are quite divided. I don't think Limitless is always calling Ace Jack off. I don't think Konstantin is always 3-betting Ace Jack off. Ace Jack suited, I think, are in both players' ranges, so I think that kind of goes both ways. Same with a hand like King Queen. 10s, I think, is not in either of the ranges. King 10 suited could be both in the ranges, so I think in general the 10 doesn't really change much. Konstantin had already had the range advantage in terms of Ace King, Aces, Queens, Kings. So I think Konstantin is just gonna fire off quite often. And then for Limitless, there's, again, not a lot that he can do. I think he should just call down with his king. And then you have a couple of other good bluff catchers, which are going to be Queen Jack suited or Ace Queen. Probably going to get called with a certain frequency. Konstantin checks, which is quite interesting. I think if he did have a bluff, he will probably follow through, unless he has like the worst type of bluff, which is ace-5 of diamonds, I guess. But then again, ace-5 of diamonds, also you could make an argument while we're blocking ace-jack of diamonds. But I think we're blocking way more folds in ace-8 suited, ace-9 suited. So I think that's a fine give up for Konstantin. We're also blocking hand like 5-4 suited. Now it's up to Limitless, and I think Limitless is just going to bluff his air. Okay, this makes a lot of sense. I'm curious what he would do with a hand like 7s and 8s, because there are maybe a couple of benefits. So let's say Konstantin did river a hand like ace-10 suited or jack-10 suited. We might be able to bluff him off that hand. But 7s and 8s do have some showdown value versus draws that gave up. So I wouldn't mind checking back either. Limitless now ships it in when we have a snap fold from Konstantin. I think this is a spot where people don't really have too much hands, if they played their hand correctly, that are going to be now in a tough spot facing a bet. I think a lot of hands that were in a tough spot facing a bet would have probably bet themselves. So I think he just had to give up that. Yeah, he didn't really have much of the decision. If he would be thinking, I think, like I said, his most likely holding would be a 10 or maybe a turn, or maybe ace-queen on the turn that he decided to barrel. That could be an option as well. Luuk opens from the cutoff. The recreational calls in the small blind. Check. Check. Could actually be a spot where both players could have some sort of a leading range. Up to Luuk, who I don't think is going to c-bet all that often. He does c-bet 1/3 sizing. The recreational get out of the way, which I'm quite surprised. Usually in these low boards, if you're a recreational player, not even if you're a recreational player, also if you're a professional player, there's quite a lot of hands that have potential, right? Any 2 overs is some sort of potential, and if you have a lower card, you have a gutter with it or a pair. So it's usually not really a board that you expect a lot of fold equity on if you are Luuk. So Limitless comes in for the call. Board is quite drawy. So let's see what Luuk does. He goes for a 3/4-ish bet. And now it's up to Limitless, who didn't check raise the flop versus 1/3, which I thought was interesting. I think his most likely holding is just a naked 8 or naked 5, a naked 9. I think a lot of his draws benefits from check raising. Kind of depends also how he perceives Luuk's c-betting range here, if he's going to c-bet a lot or not. Like I said, I think it's an option for Limitless to maybe lead out with some straight draws. As we discussed in our dunk betting video, if you haven't seen that one, go check that out. River is an ace, which is an interesting card. I think it probably benefits Limitless a little bit more, as like I said, I think he could play a hand like ace-8, ace-9, ace-10 with a heart or something this way. And I don't think Luuk is going to have a lot of aces in his range, unless it's something with the ace of hearts. I think Luuk's most likely holding is just having a strong hand, an overpair, or he was trying to bluff Limitless with a hand like king, jack, king, queen. Luuk decides to check, and he actually shows up with the ace-queen, which I actually think was unexpected. I would have actually expected him to check. And Limitless shows up with the draw that I think he could decide to lead out himself on the flop. And could check raise the flop as well if he doesn't lead out. I think both hands could have been played differently. But at least, you know, Luuk is a social guy, and he apologizes to Limitless. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, remember to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below and follow the channel. Go take a look at other videos that we have made. I'm sure you will like it as well. If you want to see a free 1-hour demo of the mechanics of poker, our main coaching program, go over to pokerambition.com/mechanics.